Hello and welcome to the European Parliament. I'm here today with Peter Niedermüller, S&D Group, in fact Vice President and Treasurer of the S&D Group and Vice President of the Democratic Coalition Party in Hungary. Peter, big referendum this weekend in Hungary. What does it say? I mean, the result is overwhelming in one sense. 90% of voters sided with the government, but it was found to be invalid. So is this perceived in Hungary as a success for Orbán and the Fidesz party, of course, or is it a failure and a strategic error?
I think so. It's an absolutely failure. But let me explain a little bit the situation. There were 3.3 million voters. They gave a valid vote during this referendum. And about 98% of these 3.3 million voters voted for the government. Yeah? But on the other side, we have almost 5 million voters who didn't take part on that referendum, or they gave an invalid vote. So we have to see this deep gap in the Hungarian society, this division. On the one side, almost 5 million voters against the referendum, and on the other side is 3.3 million for the government's project. And in that situation, the Hungarian Prime Minister says this is a victory for Hungary. No, this is an absolutely failure of the government because they initiated this referendum and they didn't win this referendum.
The question was, do you want the European Union to be able to prescribe the mandatory settlement, etc.? Was this a question of Hungary versus the European Union rather than a question about whether Hungary is clearly, whether it was about migration?
First of all, there is no plan of mandatory settlement. This is nothing. That was just a suggestion, a proposal in the European Parliament, but it was other alternatives as well. This is the very first point. But the second point is that the Hungarian Prime Minister followed after the Charlie Hebdo attack. It means from January 2015, a very, very strong xenophobic campaign in Hungary. Arguing against migration, saying that migration means terrorism, because migrants and refugees are potentially terrorists, saying that migration is a punishment for Europe, and saying that there is a kind of a danger coming from the migration and from the refugees, a danger for the Hungarian identity, for the white Christian culture of Europe. So this is an argumentation which is really very, very far-right argumentation. And in that sense, that was one path or one way of the Hungarian government. And at the same time, of course, the Hungarian Prime Minister argued all the time that Brussels is a kind of decline West. Yeah, the West is in decline, and we do not want a kind of Western Europe, because he told in Poland that we need a cultural counter-revolution, and he told, I want Europe, said, or told the Hungarian Prime Minister, but I want another Europe. And I said, so this is the danger, and it was a topic of this referendum as well, when he told, yeah, we want an illiberal state, and therefore a kind of illiberal European Union. And this is what we, the Hungarian opposition, we do not want this kind of Europe.
Taking that point, last year the European Parliament on the 10th of June adopted a resolution on a situation in Hungary which arose from concerns about the rule of law and fundamental rights in the country, and called on the Commission to activate the rule of law mechanism. And I'm wondering, the Commission has taken action on this issue with regard to Poland, but it has failed to do so with regard to Hungary. Why do you think that is?
It's difficult to explain. I am really, really disappointed when I listened to the first Vice President, Mr. Timmermans, saying there is no systematic breach of human rights and European values in Hungary, because this is definitely the case. If you have a look on the Hungarian situation, that you will see that Hungary is going an absolutely other way that the European Union is going. When a prime minister of a member state says, I do not want liberal democracy, what does it mean? It means that he wants an absolutely other way to go. And therefore, I think so, it's no way to explain for me when a prime minister says, I want an illiberal state, and saying, no, we want a Christian Europe, a white Europe, we do not want cultural diversity, that multicultural Europe is a failure. So how to explain that, you know? And on the other side, this is very disappointing because there are many, many voters in Hungary, many, many ordinary people who really believe in the European values and norms. And when they have to listen to the vice president or other commission members saying that actually in Hungary is everything, okay, yeah, they go a little bit other way, this is just not the reality. And I think so, I support, of course, this rule of law procedure against the Polish government. But I think so, we had to follow the same way against the Hungarian government. And the last sentence, this is very important to say, that all of these intentions are not against Poland and not against Hungary. This is against the politics of the Polish and of the Hungarian government. And this is a big difference. We are not against Hungary, not against Poland, but against this kind of politics.
It has to be said, however, that Viktor Orban is still enormously popular in your country. He has done very well in elections. One of the issues that was raised by MEPs has been the issue of freedom of the press. To what extent do you have a plural media? We've seen actions being taken. Hungary does have constitutional protection for freedom of speech and of the press, but there have been ways in which, since 2010, this has been undermined in various ways. Can we say that we now have a press that can reflect a plurality of views in Hungary?
No, but first of all, if I may, I would like to correct a little bit what you told, because Orban, I mean, the Hungarian prime minister, is not very popular in Hungary. I mean, the biggest problem in Hungary, that the Hungarian society is absolutely divided. There is some million of Hungarians who are supporting very strongly the prime minister and his politics, and in that circle he is really very, very, very popular. But on the other side, there is almost a bigger part of the Hungarian population who is very much against his politics, and in that circle he is not popular at all. But coming back to your question about the freedom of media, there is no media freedom in Hungary. But first of all, there is no media pluralism, and this is the biggest problem, you know. We have, for example, in Budapest, maybe 3-4 radio stations who are not a simple channel of the government propaganda. But if you are going to the countryside, you will see nothing of that. So people living in the small towns or small villages in Hungary or far away from Budapest, they just have the state-controlled media, nothing else. And in the state-controlled media, this is full of hate speech against migration, against Brussels, against Europe, against everything which does not follow the government's way and government's ideology. So I think so that it's really referring to the media situation in Hungary, this is really the very, very bad situation, and I cannot imagine in other member states in the European Union where the media pluralism is so restricted than in Hungary, maybe in Poland, I don't know that exactly. But you do not have any other sources for information, just the state media, let me say. And of course you can say Facebook and social media and things like that. But you know, you have to think on the situation of ordinary people living, saying again, small villages, small towns. They do not have always the possibility to reach the social media like you in Brussels or Strasbourg or myself in Budapest. So I think so this is the real problem, and we have seen the consequences of that, that many, many Hungarians have seen any migrants, and they have such a xenophobic feeling in this in the Hungarian society that this is really, really very disappointing and very sad.
Talking about the rural areas there, one of a common agricultural policy has played a big role in providing subsidies to farmers within Hungary. Has that made a difference?
No, you know, I think so. This is a very different situation in comparison with France, for example, or Spain or something like. You have to know that almost 4 million people, inhabitants in Hungary, they live on the poverty border, let me say on that way. And 4 million is almost the 50% of the Hungarian population, because we have a little bit less than 10 million inhabitants in Hungary. And you know, the agriculture and the agricultural situation in Hungary is nothing to compare with France or Spain, because many, many people living in the small villages, they do not have any kind of jobs. I mean, what the rural Hungary is very characteristic, this is unemployment. And therefore, of course, we have some big agricultural cooperations or private, but this is not enough for the population living in these rural areas in small towns. And you know, I think so that the situation is even worse in the small towns, because in villages you can always have some kind of possibility to produce your food and things like that. But if you live in a small town somewhere in Hungary, where there is no industry, no jobs, no education, what are you going to do with your children, with your kids? They have made it elementary school, and after that, what happens? And this is the biggest problem in Hungary, that the young generation living in the small towns, living in the countryside, they do not have any kind of perspective for the future. And I think so this is really the future of the Hungarian youth living in the countryside. This is absolutely hopeless.
So, what next? What next, firstly, for the left in terms of opposition? The left were in power in 2010, lost power. It seems to be very divided at this moment.
I mean, the left is fragmented, let me say, on that way. We have bigger and smaller parties. But I think so there's one common consequences of this referendum, because actually all oppositional parties and political movements called for boycott. And we have seen that it works. It means if we can step off together, you know, we can work together. It does not mean that we need just one party. This is not the question. But of course, if we are able to put together our programs, we are able to put together our intentions, our political plans, then we can win. Because as I told you before, the most important thing, I'm absolutely convinced, to give a future, a perspective, a hope for the people living in Hungary, to saying that your children will have a better life as you have. And I think so this is something what can bring together these parties. And of course we will have a lot of discussion and we will have a lot of difficulties, but I'm absolutely sure if we are able to give an optimistic, a future-oriented perspective for the population, that we will win the national election in 2018.
Peter Niedermüller, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, madam.